Okay, so what we have going on the world of FEMS. So transition is WIMS is no longer around. I'm hoping everybody has made the formal transition over to FEMS, and we are continuing with our development a little bit slower than we had hoped, but we are still working through that. We do have a release coming up here, 3.5, that's coming up in the middle of December. What that release will do is it's going to be bringing in a cleaned up data set from 2023, 2024, and part of 2025. So that'll gap fill any of the missing data that we have. It will also do a QC of the data. It won't change any of the quality control data again, but it's going to flag any of the information that you have that may be erroneous data. So it will also be bringing in certain mesonets. We will bring in additional sources, and you'll be able to filter that by, you'll be able to filter the views. So I'm going to show what that looks like going forward here. So as you get into the map view on the filter, you'll be able to click on the filters. The first one that we have is you'll see seasonal trend charts. So if you do not, you only want to see stations that have historical trend charts or historical data. You just click on that, and these will be the stations that have any seasonal trend charts. If you just want to see stations that don't have historical information, you could also just click on that, and that'll bring in those stations into view as well. The other piece that we have on here is networks. So you will start sorting by network, by RAWs, ASOS, and mesonet, depending on what you are interested in viewing. So those are the primary functions that we have. Additionally, we do continue to work on some of the reports. So you'll start seeing additional reports that are be coming in here and updating that information. I believe we'll probably be getting a new push of these reports probably within the next week or so. And then the other piece of this release is going to be in the for the FEMS admin group, which is currently only Travis, myself, and Cheryl. We'll be able to edit the fire behavior, or sorry, not fire behavior, the fire danger parameters. So any of the drought fuel catalogs, we'll be able to add new catalogs, adjust these fuel model catalogs, and assign stations to these catalogs. The caveat to this is we are working on a process to make sure that that happens in a organized fashion, because once you go through and change a catalog, there's going to be numerous impacts that could happen downstream. First off is you need to make sure that any other agency that may be utilizing that station is aware of any changes in the catalogs. You would need to make sure that you have that communication that's documented and that everybody knows that it's occurring, that they agree upon any of the changes that are occurring within those catalogs. So this is going to be, I should say, FEMS is not making any wholesale changes to any of the catalogs during this process or during this one. It's just the ability to make these edits in the future. So again, as we start moving forward, we will have that availability to make some of the edits to the catalogs. But again, there's going to have to be a lot of communications in order to make sure we have that taken care of, so that we're not potentially screwing up other analysis work that is done by other agencies. So those are the main 3 or 4 main pieces of the work that has been completed, or that's going to be completed on the 3.5 release. As we move forward into next year, some of the longer term steps that we're going towards for FEMS is mostly going to be on the work for the beginning of the year is going to be in the data integrity, trying to work towards getting a more balanced QC and gap filling of the weather stations, as well as the recalculation process when we do get a gap fill NQC data set. So the long-term goal that we are shooting for is a near real term. So maybe once a day, once every 4 or 5 days, we are able to update our information, update the weather information that is from the weather stations. And if there's any erroneous data and or if there's any data that was missed, any gaps in the services, that data would then be populated with data from the gridded weather information sources. So we're working towards getting that fully automated. I know there's been a lot of questions about that as of recently about how to go in and adjust or fill in missing information. And we are, those are really the long-term process that we're going for, is to try and take care of that. Sorry, I had a spider dangling in front of my face. So that's like the next 6 to 9-ish months. We also are working on a couple of pieces or a couple of small enhancements. One to the fuel moisture database. We are working to enhance those charts that are associated with the field sample data and showing in more of the traditional information that you'd be used to seeing with a daily or a maximum, minimum, the average line and the current line. So we're working to try and get that completed, hopefully by next field season as well. And then eventually we are we're still working currently with NOAA to integrate gridded in some way into FEMS. It's going to be a little bit more of a process just because of the sheer data size and the data needs for that, and then some of the mapping capabilities. But we are working towards getting that information, or I know has been working very diligently on getting that built up, and hopefully we'll be able to get that display at least integrated into FEMS here within the next year and a half. So those are the long-term priorities that we have going forward and what we're working on in the short term. So I want to see if there's any questions on where that is currently sitting. I guess one of the other pieces is forecast information. We're continually analyzing that to see about the cadence of when we bring forecasts in, how often we bring forecasts in, as well as snow flag information and snow depth that we are currently utilizing, to seeing if we want to adjust those thresholds to not be quite as sensitive as it currently is with snow flags. So a couple of the other bigger pieces that we are looking at and analyzing and trying to find out when would be some good times to, one, if we're going to make changes, make those changes, and then how to integrate those into the system. So now I'll open up any questions on where we are moving with FEMS for the time being.
Hey, Scott, Steve Wilmer from California.
Hey, Steve.
Hey, when do you expect to see the precipitation amounts come into the data links?
Say that, guess I'm not following that one. Precip coming in from the data links?
Yeah, so we have the data links that we push into our CAL FIRE spreadsheets. Some of our units are looking at that data in real time, and the data links do not bring in the precipitation amounts that you would normally see on the FEMS front page. We heard that was something that would see in the future, but I was just wondering when we would see that moving forward.
So when you open up a station and when you download, so you're not seeing any precips amounts at all when you're downloading in the data links?
Correct. When you use the live data link, so we can put it into Excel to look at the data, we get 0 amounts regardless of what's actually occurring. But you can go back and look at the FEMS front page, the map you're on right now, and you can see that obviously the stations are reporting. And then I'll go back into WX weather and you can see the station is reporting the precipitation amount, but we're not getting the precipitation amount in the data link.
Okay, so if I were to then use, so when I go to the download page and you do weather and you do your observation and forecast and you do hourly, this is where you're
Correct.
saying you're not getting, and then you do the copy data link, you're not seeing
Yeah.
precip.
Correct. And if you wanted to look, you could pull up, say, Reader Ranch, because I've had over the last few days, I've had precipitation all over that site for days. So I should be able to get precipitation. You can get it on your map here, but on that data link you just put in, you don't get, it's just zeros.
That is very interesting, Steve. I will make note of that one, and if there is a bug for that, which it sounds like there may be, is it only occurring with hourly or is it daily, or have you not tested the difference between the two?
I have a 1 hour, I have a fire danger daily that had the precipitation amount on there. I didn't pay much attention to it, but I can confidently say that myself and another unit aren't getting the hourly precipitation. And I expected maybe an hourly precipitation amount, not a total, but we're just getting zeros.
That's really interesting. What about have you done just a straight download without the data link? I mean, it shouldn't matter, but
anytime you pull in I haven't looked at it through the live data, because you can download the data and put it into Fire Family Plus and see the precipitation amounts, but you can't get it to live. So it's just zeros. At least I hope that I can get that precipitation amount. I've looked at the data with precipitation, so I honestly, I can't confirm it right now, but I've seen precipitation in my data set.
Right. Okay, what station? I just want to give it I'm just curious. What station were you saying that you had?
We'll do Reader Ranch. That's common spelling on Reader, common spelling on Ranch.
Yeah. Oops, I hit the wrong button there. Let's see here. I have to stare at my ugly mug, juggling around here. Okay, I will definitely take a look at that, Steve, and find out what is happening. If there's something broken between the UI and the download, and I'll get back to you on that one. So,
thank you.
Yeah, good question. I haven't heard that one before, and that kind of seems to be a key piece. So, we'll see what we can do. Other questions? All right, so we're going to move into a couple of other topics. So a couple of, there have been numerous questions, I guess, honestly, around forecasting information and forecast weather. But before we get into that one, there was also, I've heard several different discussions going around about FEMS and Fire Family Plus not lining up. And so usually it's in the hourly data where the readings are off and not tracking well. I know that there's one specifically KBDI that we're having an issue with, and we found the issue in the code with that, and we'll be working on getting that fixed probably in the early part of next year. And that's what the absolute values, the trends are lining up well. It's just that the absolute values are off a little bit, and it's due to the timing associated with that. It continues, the code continues to lock into 1300, and so we're kind of getting a half-day precip, which is throwing things off on the KBDI side. I think it is only a KBDI side of things, and since KBDI does not factor into any of the other outputs. It has not been affecting any of the ERCs or anything like that. But I'm going to bring on Matt Malasic. Matt, are you still available?
Yeah, I am, Scott.
All right. So I'm gonna turn over. So Matt reached out to me about a week and a half ago, and he definitely had some questions about misalignment between the two systems, and him and I had some really good long conversations on Friday afternoons, and so I thought it would just overall be a really good example of one, how he picked through the data and found some, I guess, the solutions to where he was at and what he'd been finding out overall. So him and I are just kind of work through this discussion piece again for you and answer questions as we go through. I'm just kind of curious to see if other people have seen it. So Matt, I'm going to pass it over to you for just a few minutes here. And like I said, if you need anything, we can just keep chatting as we go. So.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. I do have a couple places where I'd like you for better explanation, but turned off my camera just for bandwidth, but just wanted to quickly run through some of the discussion pieces that Scott and I were having regarding, as we have live fire danger, or we're looking at fire danger for the current year, we have folks that are looking at Fire Family Plus graphs or cataloging information there in the form of SIGs. And then when you're taking that information from FEMS and you're averaging it, although FEMS isn't giving us a stats graph that visually shows that, the numbers were off. Multiple indices, multiple outputs that we were seeing that. So talking with Scott, the big driver of this is what he already mentioned earlier, is about the recalculation that is not happening in FEMS currently. So just wanted to give a visual for folks, kind of just what I went through, more for my understanding, but also I think it may help if anybody's having some issues with them just being off. So quickly, I just grabbed the FW21 file for multiple RAW stations and started sifting through weather data. As to be expected, the FW21 file, if you look at the daily or hourly listings in FEMS, is going to match the hourly listings in Fire Family Plus. And what you're seeing here is, even if there is missing data in FEMS, that is also coming over into Fire Family Plus, as we would expect. So in the data set that I looked at, I had 18 hours of missing data in both FEMS and Fire Family Plus. So they mirror each other. They're the exact same data. Also went through a correlation test just to see, you know, are these values that are coming over, is there any wonkiness that's happening when we're transferring that information from FEMS to Fire Family Plus, and they all came out good. With that, if we transition over to looking at hourly fire danger, which both systems give us outputs for, what we can see here is we brought over those 18 missing hours of data into Fire Family Plus. But when we look at fire danger, we're also seeing that there's 10 extra that are missing in FEMS. And what you're seeing here is not the same time frame as the last, but you're seeing the records in FEMS that are not calculating fire danger hourly. Whereas in Fire Family Plus, we are getting outputs for those hours. So talking with Scott, I think the root cause of what, you know, I was not necessarily understanding was that when there is a missing hour of data, or when there's missing weather data in FEMS, it is obviously not calculating fire danger. But the relationship that FEMS has with WXX will eventually backfill that information if available. And when that is available, that is being cataloged in FEMS as FW21. And when you export it in the Fire Family Plus, you can then calculate the hourly. And Scott, this is kind of that relationship of what, you know, for whatever reason you're missing some data, the process in FEMS that is cataloging or backfilling that information, if you wanted to take the realm.
Yeah, exactly. So this is, I guess we've in the development process gone through this, crawl, walk, and run phase. And when we first started doing the development for WX weather and how we did the relationship, we first needed to establish these direct connections so that we would get the information. But we realized a lot of times there's delays in the uplink between the station and the satellites and then getting in the WX weather. And then when we pull the station, we delay that pull like 10 minutes, just so hopefully that linkage happens between the station and WX weather. But sometimes it doesn't do that. Well, what WX weather does is it actually goes back and it regathers any of the missing inputs that may have been there from like the past couple of hours or whatever it may be. So eventually what happens is because we are importing it at every 15 minutes when we bring in the weather data, the weather inputs may be missing. So if you go back to your previous slide and you look at those missing inputs, we have the original, or our FW21 is missing that time frame. What we do then is we go back after 24 hours and we test the system for three cycles, and we go back and gather the FW21, or we gather the weather inputs for any of these all this gapped weather, and we then fill in the FW21 with the data that now is in WX weather, and we populate that. What is not occurring on our end is a full recalculation of that. So we don't have a way then to trigger a recalculation of fire danger. So when we originally, once it calculated it, those hours are missing, which is what you're seeing on the right-hand side, that data is now missing. Then when you bring that FW21 file, though, which has now the full weather data into Fire Family Plus, it calculates it. So it appears that the system is off, but we haven't had the opportunity or we don't have the system yet set up so that it's doing a recalculation. That process is being built. And like I said, we should have that fully available. In our December, we should be able to have it so that we can go back and trigger a recalculation when these systems are occurring. So we should be, taking care of this process behind the scenes for everyone. It's just that right now we don't have that. So this is where some of the differences are coming in when you start looking at the values. So I know that's a long explanation of that, but the weather data is there. That's why it's in the CSV or in the FW21, but fire danger is not calculated in Fire Family Plus, or I'm sorry, in FEMS for those missing times. So,
and Scott, kind of what we talked about, that wouldn't have been triggered in WIMS either until somebody went in and done a recalc. So I think, the point being, we're moving towards a recalculation that's either on an hour, a day, or more so than a manual punch of that. But we are now in FEMS seeing all this information, and it's at our fingertips, where in WIMS it wasn't triggered until you had to go back and recalc because you realized you're missing data. Is that correct too?
Yeah, that's correct. And with WIMS, you had to go back. It was not an automatic process. We had to have Lou go in there, or Neil go in and grab the data from the RAWS station itself and pull it in manually, and then he would usually trigger the recalculation. So it took people, in order to actually notice that they were missing data, to go grab it. Otherwise, you were missing the data, and it was not being automatically backfilled. So yes, that is correct. It was not an automatic recalculation in WIMS either. So.
Awesome. I have just a couple more slides. So just a continuation of this same data set, primarily looking at this, but just that relationship of how, the lack of that information. And why I bring this up is because when we're in an area, what I've noticed is when we're in an area where we're missing data that was pretty close to current time, we're going to see those differing if we're using Fire Family Plus at the same time. We have folks that are using Fire Family Plus on a daily or bi-daily time frame, and they're seeing large discrepancies. So just as we look at these 5 hours, we started off coming at 13.1 and 12.5. That discrepancy isn't that big of a deal, but what we do see is when we're missing the data in FEMS, it's carrying that last value over once it starts to pick back up and calculate, where it has progressively gone down in Fire Family Plus. And where we see this, I have a better visual kind of zoomed into this, is when you're missing that gap filled or that fire danger in FEMS, you're going to have a lag. And whether that lag's happening at night or during the day, depending on when you're looking at it, we're going to see that. And it's going to take time, depending on which indice or output you're looking at, to essentially calibrate out or look into the future where they kind of calibrate to the same. Also looking at the hourly, I just wanted to note that although there's discrepancies there, from a statistical standpoint, running a correlation test on the full analysis set that I looked at, we're still like 0.98 at the lowest, which statistically speaking is very, very good. So the correlation between the FEMS data as it relates to fire danger outputs and FEMS seems to be consistent, and that's pretty much every RAW station that I've looked at has been pretty consistent on that. I did want to mention this. We normally don't go down to the hour, but I think what we're seeing when we're missing data is that lag time, and it's all stuff that you guys probably already know, but it really stood out. So around the beginning of June is when FEMS was set up and fire danger was starting to calculate. You would expect, as we see here, that fire danger was matching up until the point you end up having two calculators going at the same time. But as you step through and look at these, we had, a break in data or a difference in data coming out of the gate here. And over time, we get to a point where those values start to become more similar. And then we have another missing data and we see some separation, so on and so forth as you go through there. And I'm guessing, to the degree that technology has, is we're always going to have these what I call blips or differences, but it also tracks and trends very well and has a good correlation between the two. Lastly, just to give you an idea, depending on the indice, it can have a more separation. Looking at stuff like IC, you're going to have much smaller absolute numbers, and you're going to see less of a discrepancy compared to BI or KBDI as it's there. The only other thing, Scott, I just wanted to kind of throw in the room, because you gave me a quick platform, is I had, looking at all of the stations, and I use KBDI just as a visual, understanding that there's some nuances with it, but looking at individual stations and hourly data really showed to me, that correlation between not only the overall correlation of the raw stations as we do in FDOPS, but that day-to-day frequency. You can certainly see as you start to sig stuff that the laws of averages, I understand that we're going to be closer in nature, but really getting that idea of which ones are the ones that are causing you issues is going to, kind of give you that idea in a wholesale of why things aren't correlating well together. And specifically, if you're in that area or in that close time frame where you're seeing these differences or this missing data that is being backfilled in FEMS, that's going to be your most differing numbers as you move through. Specifically with this FDRA, we had some snow flag issues at the same time, so it was kind of exasperated, but just some things to think about. I think the hourly stuff that Scott had me go through really brought to light a lot of the correlation between what happens in Fire Family Plus and what happens in FEMS and where we're going and how we can be, to me, happier that FEMS is looking at that more automatic and bringing that deviation closer together. So that's all I had, Scott. I appreciate your time. And
no, hey Matt, can you go back one slide group there to the ERC trends? Yeah, where you were missing. Keep one more, I guess. Yeah, so this one. So this I think is really key. So when you're looking at ERCs, this is, really what we've talked about for many times and saying, okay, this is where missing data from RAWs is a big issue. And the only way to fix these discrepancies in this system without actually going back and doing recalculations is time. So 1 hour fuels, you could have gone back and you could have seen like that, even if you go back one, I think it was one more slide, you had those discrepancies. It corrected fairly quickly after about 3 or 4 hours. 3 or 4 hours, the system kind of equalized again fairly quick between those two systems. And now we're back into where those numbers are matching fairly closely in. And so the shorter the time lag of our system, the quicker those individual indices will get back to equalization between them. But since we're looking at ERC with this is where we keep saying, if you miss, a day, you're having an impact. If you miss 3 days, it's going to take you about a month to get back to where you would be expecting for that time. And that's really, this is, I think, drawing into that key that, yes, the trends are going to be there, but you're going to miss, like, if you're really concerned about those absolute values, you're going to miss that if you start missing, 2, 3, 4 days out. And after 7 days, it's who knows where you would have been. So the watching of those raw stations is extremely important to make sure that the tipping bucket's still working, that your snow flags are lining up the way that you would expect them to be, and that your sensors aren't off, and to being able to catch that information as soon as you can to get those systems repaired if you need to, or correcting whatever on the input side, so that you don't have these types of long-term things, because we can't do anything to really repair what we don't have, at least as of right now. Again, we're working towards that. So hopefully we'll be able to at least have some data flowing in for you. But remember that model data is different than observed data, and we're going to be mixing those two as we start going forward. And there's some caution, there's some benefits. You won't be having quite as much of this, but there are also going to be some cautions going forward with that by mixing the two types of data sets. So I guess you open up to, questions. Matt, thank you so much for putting this presentation together. It's, to me, it was a great visualization of a lot of the pieces that we talked about. But I want to see if anybody has, questions for myself or Matt on what he did for the analysis, and I guess if anything comes to light for people. Yeah, Rachel.
Hey, Matt and Scott, just a question for you. How did you kind of first notice that there was an issue? Do you have like a workbook that you're using for your daily fire danger? Is there something that you recommend kind of tracking as fire planners to make sure we catch those?
yeah, Rachel, good question. Actually, I've been working with some FMOs, and it's coming from their daily outputs. So it was for a specific question that came in, and I kind of dove in and looked at it. I think moving forward, looking at that, I think just kind of the comparison, depends on how far removed you are from the field. But if you're trying to look at a regional level, I think it would be relatively tough, because you're going to have to look at so many ROS stations. But for me, the forest was able to reach out and just say, hey, we're having this slight issue. And it was around KBDI, and the variation went from like 30 points difference, which isn't too crazy in KBDI, but up to like 150. So we had like a large enough discrepancy, and essentially we were missing data in real time. So we were in one of those areas where you're going to see the largest discrepancy before it starts calibrating and coming back closer. So yeah, I don't have a workbook or anything like that, Rachel, but hoping to in the future.
Thanks, Matt.
You bet.
Hey, Rachel. This is Steve Wilburn from CAL FIRE. In our, I have 5 counties that we look at, and the best way that I have done to identify anomalies is on the seasonal trend, on the bell curve that you can get out of Fire Family Plus, is you could throw up, you're like, hey, this doesn't feel right. First of all, is it consistent with the season? That being the number one. And then after that, then the weather die. Hey, did this event actually occur? And was there a data gap? So on a quick service, just pulling up your Fire Family Plus graph for that particular model and then seeing where it lands. Hey, is it on the bell curve? Okay, if it's out, why? And one issue that San Diego had, and it was a result of dispatch levels. Long story short, it was that reaction time of the X and the Y. And like, hey, it's raining outside. Why am I in a high dispatch? I'm like, well, because it just started raining outside. Give it some time. But to answer your question, and I speak from my own personal experience, whether Matthew has a good suggestion on this, is I went back and I would just plot the days, and then I would go into the inputs for the weather inputs and see if there was any anomaly in there. Hey, did I have a solar rad input issue? Did I have whatever? Insert whatever you're looking for. But I've been successful on that enough that we've tracked down an anomalous event on one of our sites in regards to ambient air moisture that we're still looking into. So I want to just share that because I think that's it's something I just figured out. I don't have a good answer how I got there other than just looking at the bell curve.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, so and I'm gonna keep the conversation moving because I think there was also some good points that Matt brought up that I think Michael can also help out answer, because Matt had brought up about, hey, this was really good to look at, individually as stations, and when you start looking at it as a SIG, it's really kind of hard to pick apart exactly what's going on and where the issues are. And we had a similar situation happening with that down in Colorado. And so Michael, I was hoping you can jump on here and kind of work through some of the questions and what we were working through together on that forecast information.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely can do. Let me pull this up real fast. Okay. Yeah, so see, I just have a quick presentation. Really appreciated what Matt did, because we're also kind of looking at the data to see what's lining up and what's not. And so I'm working with a few different dispatch areas in Western Colorado, Durango, Montrose, and Grand Junction. And we had this issue kind of pop up where one of the fire staff was like, hey, how come the calculator says we should be in restrictions, and how come the observed values in the afternoon are really, there's a discrepancy between what was forecast in the morning. So just kind of looking at this one example, not too far off, but The forecast burning index was supposed to be 90, and we're only getting 26 for the observations. And so just went through an exercise in order to compare the forecast to the observations. I have 3 dispatch areas I'm working with 9 FDRAs and about 26 or so individual RAW stations. So we just kind of set out to ask the question, how well is the FEMS forecast matching the observations? In order to understand if we have an over prediction problem or an under prediction problem, we focused the initial analysis on ERC and burning index, although you could obviously look at any variable you wanted. And then I just picked a time frame that kind of roughly matched our fire season. So I'll just kind of work through some of that. Just built a spreadsheet, not really, in order to pull in the FEMS information into Excel, a bunch of queries for the observations and a bunch of queries for the forecast. And we just overlaid the observations on top of the forecast. And what we're seeing here, the blue lines are in the 4-pack graph. We're seeing the blue lines are the forecast, the orange are the observations, and these are the 4 weather stations in the lower elevation FDRA. And so you can just really do a quick visual in order to see how well these are lining up. And on the top right, we overlaid all 4 forecasts on top of one another. And then on the bottom right, we looked at the forecast errors, so the forecast minus the observations, and we can get a really quick handle on if we're over predicting or under predicting in that FDRA. The axes weren't super clear on the presentation, so I just overlaid those on top as we go through a bunch of these. Even though the lines kind of look the same, they're on different scales. So in general, this FDRA had really good alignment for the ERC. Moving to the burning index for that same FDRA, we saw a little less alignment. You'll notice on the forecast error, we're pretty consistently under predicting burning index. And if you look at each of the RAW stations individually, some are contributing to that a little more than others. Here's another one where you can ask the question, which one of these is not like the other? So there's something going on with weather station 3 where we're constantly under predicting, and you can see that both in that you can see that on the weather station 3 graph and in that bottom forecast error graph. And went through the burning index, and again we're seeing it tracks not as good as ERC most of the time. We're seeing some of those anomalous events where either spikes at really high or low, but if you look at the access there, we're really only over predicting or under predicting by 10, which is pretty acceptable. And you can just and I worked through all 9 of my FDRAs and all 26 or so of my RAW stations. Easy enough. We're seeing some under prediction. Again, I just want to have an understanding of what that under prediction is, if it's consistent. The trends all match, but it's good for us to know kind of where we're at. And again, kind of rinse and repeat here. So I just quickly summarized all that data so I could present to each of the dispatch areas and the different fire staff and folks interested in this. We had really good alignment with ERC, except in 1 or 2 RAW stations. There was more variability in the burning index. Like Scott and I discussed, or like Scott told me rather, a lot of this is having to do with the transition between on the gridded wind forecast and the point wind forecast, and the heights of kind of where we're predicting the 20-foot winds versus 30-foot, and how that math works. That's kind of why we're seeing that. And then I'll just kind of run folks through. This is my second to last slide, but I just built a really quick spreadsheet. You can see on the top kind of window there, I have an overview worksheet. This pulls in 8 different FEMS queries, 2 for each RAW stations, 1 forecast, 1 observed. The queries and connections window on the right there reference the named cell, which makes it really easy. And then the results, I've 2 results tabs or worksheets, one for ERC that summarizes all those images you just saw, and one for BI that did the same. And so I was able just to take this spreadsheet, hit copy and paste 9 times, switch out the RAWs IDs, and after I got it all squared away, it was a fairly quick process to work through all 9 of my FDRAs and get a handle on this. In summary, just a quick little analysis like this helps me understand what was going on. The other thing that was going on when that FMO or fire staff said, hey, something's wrong here, is the fire restrictions are front loaded. So looking at the forecast more than the past days. And so over prediction error in the forecast was more influential because it was more that one metric was more future looking. This is also really helpful for LTANs and FBANs. You can do an analysis like this in order to understand which of those nearby RAW stations are tending to over or under predict ERC, and you can adjust your modeling accordingly. And then I had this set up. I'm not a programmer. I'm not a coder, but I'm fumbling my way through FEMS, and the URLs are super helpful. And so it was really easy just to, once I had it set up, just switch out the station IDs, and I could generate the results fairly quickly. And a couple little things that I was kind of stumbling on as I went through this are I was able to get the I had trouble downloading the forecast data from FEMS. I was hoping to do this on the daily max, but it was hard for me. I don't know if anyone else has had this trouble either, but I was unable to download historical forecast data. And so the workaround there was I just tried the hourly instead of the daily. That worked. Had some of the missing records issues that Matt had brought up, but for this purpose it was fairly it didn't really matter. And then just used a max if statement to convert the hourly to the max for the day. I had to reformat the date, but that's getting into the nuts and bolts. If anyone wants, send me an email, send me a note. I'm happy to walk you through this and share the workbook with you if you're interested.
Thank you, Michael, very much for that. So questions on the work that was done or examples of how this can be applied, going forward.
Hey, Scott, that seems super useful. Is that something that might be integrated into a report or dashboard that you guys could put kind of in your backlog?
Yes, that is definitely one that we are trying to we're working with Superman Maxwell currently on that in U of A to try and get that information built up. So part of that, there's one thing that we have that's a issue. We are currently not saving all historical forecast files. So the latest one overwrites the newest one. Yes, we have the the latest data saved itself, but the raw forecast file is not saved. And so we are working on getting that saved up into an S3 bucket. So we'd have each individual file that comes in from SPC completely saved, so that you'd be able to look at what at any one point in time what that 7-day forecast looks like. So we're getting some more information with that stored. Like I said, we do have the historical information at least stored since we've been getting the files from it, but it's only the most recent, that day's forecast is really what's saved. And then the next day it overwrites that, what would in day 2, day 1 now overwrites that. But we are working on getting that built up and into some reports. So yeah, that is one of the pieces we have coming forward.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I think one of the other big pieces of that, Michael, was that, originally when it came down to as well, was there was 1 or 2 stations that were really kind of throwing the forecast off. And when you SIG the stations together, it was really hard to understand what was occurring and why. But when you took the stations apart piece by piece, you were able to really understand which ones, and that you summarized that very well then for the FMOs of what station's doing what and which ones do better for which scenarios. Like some of them are great for ERCs, and some of these stations are really good for BIs, but not all the stations should fit in the SIGs as a whole. So I thought that was also one of the key pieces that, to come out of that is, remember, it's really difficult to really understand the full grasp of what's happening when we start SIGing stations together. And if you ever talk with me about this stuff, one of the first questions I'll say is, what are you doing with the data? Because I'm always going to ask you, if you're SIGing it together and we can't peel it apart to really know what that full onion looks like, we're going to have a really hard time deciphering really what's going on. So I guess anybody if you guys ever call me up about this stuff, that's usually one of the first things I'll do is say, okay, what's the individual stations look like? Because we gotta really peel it apart. So, and that's really what Michael did a great job with on this entire process. Other thoughts or discussions?
Hey, Scott.
Yeah, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Yourself?
Doing well.
How far back can we access the historical forecast?
You should have them back to when we went live. What was that, 2023? Like June of 2023, I believe it's back. It should be back to there. But again, we don't have daily max, it's hourly data.
Yeah. But the forecast is potentially available.
Yes. Yep. It should be in there. If it's not, let me know. But I thought we should have everything saved from when we first started ingesting and went live with FEMS 1.0 back in the day. So,
cool. Yeah, that's exciting.
You at least have a couple years of data, I think, at this point. So
That's definitely good enough for comparison. I appreciate that.
And remember, that will just be weather forecast. You will not have fire danger, because fire danger was not being forecasted until, I want to say last fall. Was that last November? Then we kind of went live with it. So we might have it available, but really June was when we started really having everything for fire danger being shown. So if you want fire danger itself, you're going to only have up until, it really didn't start getting forecasted until like June at this point, because we were still working on the calculator prior to that. We did start having it December of last year, but I wouldn't utilize it because we found a couple of errors in the calculator or in the init file that we had that were impacting it, which is why we had to hold off kind of until that June timeframe. So,
okay.
But the forecast itself, if you just want the weather data, that should be there. It should be farther back.
Yeah, no, that sounds great.
Okay. I know we only got a couple minutes left. Any other questions or discussions, and just kind of open up to anything else going on? Okay, well, I want to thank both Michael and Matt very much for doing those demos for everyone. I know I learned a lot through the process. working with you guys, and I really appreciate you taking the time to work with me all through that, and then taking the time to build up those presentations and sharing with everyone. I know there's a lot of great information that's going around, and I really hope that everybody can start taking advantage of all the other work that people are working through. So that's all I have for this month. I do plan to have the call in December, so if you are around, we will see you in December. If I don't see you, have a great Thanksgiving for sure, and enjoy your holiday season. And reach out if you got any other questions. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thanks, Scott.
Thank you.
Thanks.